Okay, good morning. This is a reminder of our NeMTSS library. All of our previous Coffee Connects and other professional development recordings are all housed in our library. So that's the link to go to if you are interested in finding any of our past Coffee Connects, or obviously you'll find this one there. And we are kicking off our May Coffee Connect. If you joined us live earlier on the 1st, we ran into some technical issues. Zoom was having some major things going on that day. So we are recording a few days later, and will not be live during this recording. We were just getting kicked off and couldn't finish it the day that we had it scheduled. But this is our recording for the May Coffee Connect on problem solving. And as always, just a reminder of who we are. I'm Sarah Gentry, Social, Emotional, and Behavioral Learning Specialist for Region 5. I have Jill and Emily on the screen, so I'll let Jill go ahead and introduce herself next.
Thanks, Sarah. Jill Gunther, Social Emotional Behavioral Learning Specialist, and I serve Region 3, which is ESUs 1, 7, and 8.
Hello, Emily Arkfeld, SEBL Specialist serving Region 2, ESUs 2, 3, and OPS.
And we do not have Chandra with us today. She's Region 4 SEBL Specialist. She covers ESUs 9, 10, 11, and 17. And Mackenzie covers Region 1, ESUs 4, 5, 6, and LPS. And to kind of start off our Coffee Connects, we always start with the welcome inclusion activity, just to kind of get the brain flowing, get everybody on the same page, get transitioned into leaving behind what we were doing and get focused on what we're going to do today. So our welcome inclusion activity for May, and we're not going to be interactive with a group of people, but I guess we can do it together. But the poll question that we had is, what is your favorite thing about May? And our answers or choices were for the poll, 1, the school year is coming to a close. 2, the weather is finally feeling like spring, although where I'm at today, it does not feel like spring. 3, looking forward to planting flowers and or our garden. 4, it stays lighter longer in the evenings. And 5, May. Who likes May? I'll start by answering the poll question. I would say that it stays lighter and longer in the evenings is kind of where I'm at today. Maybe a little bit of the school year is coming to a close because my kiddos are getting ready for summer break and kind of excited about that. How about Jill?
Perfect. Yes, I would definitely say number 3. I am anxiously awaiting being able to find some time to go pick out some flowers and get some garden seed. So I'm looking forward to planting flowers and a garden.
I do not have a green thumb, so that is definitely not my choice. I would say probably 2, the weather getting nice and then staying lighter longer in the evenings. However, that is hard with young children because they think it's still time to be up and play, and even when it's bedtime.
I remember that phase. Yes, mine are past that. They stay up past my bedtime every night. Okay, so this is just kind of a reminder of our Padlet. The Padlet link is included, and the password to get into that is NeMTSS. This is just packed full of different resources. All of our previous recordings for our Coffee Connects are housed in there. Any resources that we link into our Coffee Connects are also all linked in there. So it's just a great place to go. If you're looking for something SEBL related, or you've heard us talk about a resource, you're going to find it somewhere in that Padlet. So just a great reminder that when we're not online and we're not working with you, if you're looking for resources, this is a great spot to go to get started. And then kind of transitioning into problem solving, we like to kick things off every Coffee Connect, every presentation we do, we really like to bring a quote in that kind of relates to the work that we're talking about. This quote was the one we chose for this. It says, "As the world we live in is so unpredictable, the ability to learn and adapt to change is imperative, alongside creativity, problem solving, and communication skills." So just really thinking about how important it is to have problem solving skills, especially for our students as they go out into the real world, and everything's kind of unpredictable. So we need to know how to transition and work through those things. So that's kind of the quote to kick us off for today. And then thinking about our definition, we like to remind everybody every month just kind of what social emotional behavioral learning is to us at NeMTSS, and we've defined that as a systemic process of fostering social and emotional skills among students and adults. And we really want to make sure that we emphasize the adults because that's not always something that we've thought of when we think about SEBL skills, but really thinking about the adults because we all are always evolving and developing our own skills. And the adults are really the teachers and the ones who are modeling these skills for our students. So we really want to make sure that we're fostering environments that incorporates developing those skills for adults and our students. And we want to do this, what we want to achieve is creating creating safe and supportive environments with positive behavioral and mental health outcomes for all. So thinking about those universal expectations when we're thinking about the PBIS framework, if that's a framework that you include in your system, thinking about those positive expectations that we have for every one of our students to create that safe and predictable environment. Thinking about our mental health that was added this year into our definition, our overall mental health that kind of ties in obviously with our social, emotional, and behavioral learning skills. We really just kind of bring it all together. We have our skills star on the slide, and then thinking about SEBL from the career readiness lens, thinking about what those skills we need to develop for our students as they go into the workplace or go into higher education. What skills do we want to have when they are leaving our buildings and going into adulthood or young adulthood? Now, this is our updated skills star. So if you've been with us for a while, you know this is relatively new. We've had it kind of launched for the last couple of months. So I'm not going to go real deep into that, but it was quite a process. We knew we needed to adapt and change some things and build on our previous things that we've learned and new research. And so we've adopted a couple of new skills. Pro-social behavior is a new one that we added in, and problem solving. Problem solving is really going to be the focus today, but the other skills included in there are our relationship skills, our self-awareness skills, and our self-management skills. We also updated those guiding questions and what those look like. And as we built out the skill star, really what we were trying to do with the vision of this is to kind of have a quick resource for our teachers. So when they're thinking about SEBL skills, trying to find some guidance on what to teach or incorporate into their everyday environment in their classroom. This is just kind of what we hope is a quick visual that they can go in and think about, okay, how can I teach students to be their best selves? Here's four different categories that I can think about building into whatever content I'm teaching today. And the same with pro-social behaviors, thinking about relationships. And hopefully when teachers look at this, they can say, oh, I'm already really doing a lot of this in my classroom. And maybe this is an area of growth for me. This is something that I need to work on a little bit more. And I want to be more intentional about maybe teaching students how to establish healthy boundaries. And we'll have some suggestions in our presentation today about that. So just kind of a quick resource for teachers, but it was not a quick a quick process of building. It was a very long, daunting process with tons of eyes on it to build it out. And then going into our essential elements. So at NeMTSS, like we talked about, we really believe in building systems. A lot of times when people think of MTSS, they just immediately go to that triangle, our layered continuum of support. But we believe that our systems are more involved than just building that triangle. It's such an important part, but there's a lot of things that go into it. So thinking about our infrastructure and our shared leadership, we want to make sure that our leaders are delegating tasks, that there's multiple voices at the table, multiple perspectives coming in, and that we're building out our communication and collaboration. What does that look like? Building out a plan for that. How do we make sure that all of our stakeholders' voices are being heard when we're developing our systems and building our process? And then thinking, very important, considering our database decision making. What is our data telling us when we're building out our systems? And that's for the whole system. That's for each individual student. That's for groups of students. That's for whatever we're building in for our educators and their wellness. So just kind of thinking this big picture, this whole system, and we've divided it into these 4 essential elements so that we can really be intentional about the way we bring these resources to you and the information to you to build your systems. So now we get to dive into problem solving, which is the big focus for today. So we decided that problem solving is the ability to evaluate consequences of various actions or choices. So as part of the problem solving process, we really need to think about what's going to happen if this is the decision I make. So evaluating those consequences prior to solving the problem or during that problem solving process. And then identifying, setting, and maintaining healthy boundaries. When we were building this out, it really kind of struck me that boundaries is like a buzzword right now. Setting boundaries, setting boundaries, setting boundaries. And there's a lot of misinformation kind of coming out there via social media on what a healthy boundary looks like. So really learning to identify, understand what a healthy boundary is, and establishing those, especially within the context of problem solving, so you're not the only one. You're working together with other people and setting appropriate boundaries on what you're capable of doing. And then solving problems through the decision-making process. That's kind of just a big component of problem solving, is making those decisions and then making caring and constructive choices. So the guiding question with this is, how can I use my critical thinking? So how can I work through this process and use critical thinking skills to do that? Now, diving just a tad bit deeper into this, we go into each of those skills just a little bit more. What can we do? Again, this is kind of that resource for teachers. So if your district's saying we really need to work on helping our students with problem solving, because this is an area that our data is telling us we're struggling with, you can go back and look at this resource and say, okay, problem solving, we're going to be thinking about how do we encourage our students to make responsible choices. So one of the examples on there is seek reliable sources. So many different ways you can do this, incorporating this into just your everyday learning, and you probably already are. So what kind of sources do I want to look for on the internet? That's a big lesson that we're teaching our students when we're thinking about digital citizenship and writing an essay. We're making sure they're going and looking for reliable sources, but maybe also in talking to kids about what kind of advice are you looking for? What kind of guidance are you looking for? What kind of human being are you going to go to seek that advice or that guidance? So that's one of the pieces of making responsible choices. And something that you're probably already building into your content as it is. Thinking about decision making, so maybe analyzing, why is this problem happening, finding the root cause. How can I make a decision if I don't know what's causing it, what's causing this problem? So looking at that root cause, maybe doing some analysis work with your students, really challenging their thinking to get them in there, to actually identify the problem. Sometimes we're trying to work through things and we don't even know what we're working through because it's overwhelming and stressful. Then going into evaluate consequences. I'm not going to go into each of these, but because you can glance at them and think, but evaluating consequences, identifying pros and cons. Maybe that's making a list. Maybe that's just talking it out with each other. So asking questions, coming up with the ideas of what could possibly happen if this is the choice that I make. And then setting these healthy boundaries. What does that actually look like and what does that mean? Super important to make sure that we're putting truth out for our students. So thinking about setting healthy boundaries. What are their personal limits? What do they have time for? What do they not have time for? Honoring not only their needs, but the needs of others. How can they look at another person and say, you know what, that person looks really overwhelmed. Maybe they're not setting the boundaries they need. Maybe I can help advocate for them and delegate some of those tasks or work together to find out how we can set better boundaries. Communicating wants and needs, and then obviously being able to say no. Maybe I've got too much on my plate right now. I can't handle taking responsibility for this. So those are just the 4 pieces to problem solving skills. And then going into some examples, again, we like to put these examples out there because we want to make sure that educators know teaching social emotional learning, it's not a new thing. It's already been happening. So these are just maybe language shifts, maybe perspective shifts a little bit to say, okay, I'm not actually teaching content all the time. I'm actually teaching SEBL while I'm teaching the content. But thinking about this adult example is great. Thinking about your classroom environment, maybe there's some decisions that need to be made to make changes in the classroom or make changes regarding maybe due dates or things like that with your assignments. Maybe taking some suggestions from your students, actively listening, taking some feedback and making some adaptations to, work through different problems that you might find in the classroom. The student example, so thinking about drawing a conclusion about a situation, how are they going to use those problem solving skills? So maybe think of a situation that your students are going in and just working through those critical thinking skills with them. How do you help them analyze the problem? and demonstrate that. And a lot of that's going to come from modeling or just reflective listening and having conversations with students. And again, it's something that's happening probably all the time in your school. You just might not be putting the pieces together and thinking this is a skill that I'm teaching when I'm doing this. Okay, and then center time in classroom. So for our younger kiddos that are in center time, sometimes conflict occurs in center time, especially when you're little ones and they're in that developmental phase of not necessarily wanting to share or work through things together, but really maybe coming up with some ideas of how can your students solve their problems independently while they're there, and teaching them the skills to work through those things responsibly and safely. And this kind of talks about having a class solution kit. So maybe that's like a sign on the wall that talks to them, maybe some verbal prompts that they can look at to say, to work them through the problems so they can listen to each other and give each other time to talk. That's sometimes really challenging for little guys, or big guys too, really. So then thinking about the other examples, talking about a class novel, so talking about reflections, this was the example was To Kill a Mockingbird, thinking about making constructive judgments and discussing things with an open mind, to develop those problem-solving skills, build those muscles in the brain to do that. And I don't think it's always just got to be a novel. I remember lots of social studies things, history lessons, just all those opportunities to reflect and have constructive conversations. You're really just building those muscles in the brain to help with problem solving. And to kind of talk about the why is it important that we're teaching problem solving? We wanted to bring in this example, and we've used this in a lot of our presentations because it's just such a cool example. It comes from Washoe, somewhere county school district, but it's really great. And so these are just problem solving skills. They surveyed their students to find out like what skills, SEBL skills, were really hard, which ones were easier, come more natural for their students. And this is kind of that continuum of what's challenging. So when we look up at the top, the harder things, thinking about what might happen before I make a decision. So thinking about evaluating those consequences. That's one of the hardest things these students said for them when it comes to problem solving. Thinking of different ways to solve a problem, that's a little bit harder. Disagreeing with classmates without hurting their feelings. So thinking about even that center time activity, how can we start building it up so that our students are able to disagree respectfully and work through problems together. Saying no to a friend who wants to break the rules, so setting those boundaries, that moral compass, how do we do that? But our students, or these students, really said that actually knowing what's right or wrong, having that instinct and that kind of that, I guess, ability to just identify what's right or wrong or good or bad, they find that to be easier. Being respectful of someone else's beliefs, that's something that they find to be easier. So we know based on this data that these students, those are skills that are easier, but they really need to work harder on those other ones. And I guess that data just it's kind of nice when you see data that validates the work that you did when we put into these things, the particular problem solving skills that we wanted to see more intentionally focused on in our skill star. So a little more why behind why we're talking about problem solving. We know students who practice problem solving are more likely to have higher self-esteem and self-confidence. They're going to have reduced levels of stress and anxiety, better social skills, and peer relationships. So working through that stuff is just all those conflicts are just going to make their relationships stronger. Fewer disciplinary problems and conflicts. Who does not want to see that happen? We would love to keep our kids out of trouble and out of conflict. And then higher achievement academically, and then that personal motivation. They can work through their problems, it's easier to stay motivated for them. So some ideas when we're thinking about teaching problem solving, we gave you some suggestions of just integrating it into your content, but thinking about modeling. So maybe just speaking out loud, okay, this is the problem that I've been going through, this is what I'm working on, this is how I'm doing it, model that, and then label it as you're working through things or reflecting on it with your students. Give students some opportunities where they have to practice making good choices. So maybe that's acting them out. So some role play situations. Maybe it's reading about them. We talked about the To Kill a Mockingbird example, but there's everywhere in literature, there's ways and conflict and problems to be solved or to be analyzed and thought about. Or real life examples if you're doing current events, working with your students on how to work through some of those things that are going on. That all of those things are going to help our students with their problems, strengthen their problem solving skills. And if you're working through and reflecting on problems that they have, that's also, again, kind of building those muscles in the brain to make it more natural. And then helping them reflect on their choices, another big piece. So thinking about executive functioning, that's where our problem solving kind of comes together, and thinking about the development of the brain. We wanted to kind of put this as an example in there because these are the skills that we're building, right? These are the neurological muscles that we're really trying to build. So thinking about infants, what does problem solving look like for them? Not great. Obviously, they're on the low end of that executive functioning, but we're thinking about cause and effect play, figuring how things work through simple body movements, basic play. That's how they're doing it. Now, when we're thinking about our teenagers, they're independently identifying problems at home, work with friends, they're able to sort out conflicts. These are the things we want to see. And then we've given you some skills and some ideas of some things to do to make that happen. Our early learners, they're identifying and defining problems to super complex, but the simpler things, and that's up through, almost middle school, that they're really not quite ready to get real deep into those problem solving things that are really complex without adult support. And then we put in this additional resource, the Achievery website. We recently found this. It's not a resource that we've shared many times, but it's a free resource. They have lots of different videos, lessons. They're all kind of divided by our skill areas. So if you're looking for some ideas, some video lessons to bring into the classroom to support the work, they've got some great lessons and resources here on this website. So just kind of another resource to share out. And now I'm going to pass it to Emily.
Thanks, Sarah. All right, so we are going to dive just into those 4 sub skills a little bit further with some resources, again, as usual. So starting with responsible choices, which was seeking reliable sources, analyzing information, being curious and open-minded, and practice honesty, integrity, and fairness. And so this is a nice, just fun resource. We share these things, I think, quite often, but if you are, getting here towards the end of the school year and everybody's just kind of getting a little silly and off task, this might be something fun to bring people back and thinking about, ending the year on a high note and being responsible. And so you can choose one and share it every day. Each student can have their own and cross off things as they go. Might have them then share out, like, when did they do this or what did that look like? So lots of opportunities to use this in the classroom or individually. So that is linked in there. And then the Fly 5 link as well. There's lots of great resources on there. So their website is linked in addition to the handout. Sarah talked about these, credible sources. And so this is a strategy to do that. Probably if you're calling something crap, you might want to use it with your, high schoolers or our secondary students, but really breaks down how to identify those reliable sources. So currency, is it timely? Is it out of date? Does it actually connect or matter for what you're researching? Is it relevant? Who's the intended audience of the research? Is the author qualified to write on this topic? I think about this a lot with social media and TikTok now. There's a ton of information out there being shared. And so really diving of like what credibility, what education, what experiences does this individual have to share information on this topic? Is it accurate? Is it supported by evidence? And then what is the purpose? Is it to inform, to teach, to sell, entertain, or persuade you? And again, with social media, we have a lot of influencers out there who will tell you something, and really it's just to get you to buy a certain product or to, get that money funneled back to them. So a great opportunity to use this. And then you can do it in a bunch of ways. You can, like if it's March and you're doing March Madness, you can do like a bracket style competition where you have different sources and the kids have to go and then figure out which one is more credible and that one moves on. You can use it in Kahoot or Quizlet. You can do a scavenger hunt where they have to look on Google to search for sources related to a specific topic and then evaluate which ones are most credible, give them points. You can have them debate something. So they have to find some sources to support their stance, but then perhaps the opposing side is, looking at their sources to identify if they're credible. So lots of different ways to use this in the classroom in different content areas. As always in this spring semester, we have been sharing the NDE Nebraska Career Development lesson plans that connect to each skill, just again to show that connection that these are built into our standards, these are built into lessons, it all connects to college and career readiness, regardless of age level. And so this is a being responsible one for third graders, where they are, looking at evaluating the importance of being responsible, and appropriate ways to accept responsibility for their actions. So really working in that responsibility piece into this lesson. Moving into decision making, which is identifying the problem, analyzing why it's occurring, develop and implement a plan, and reflect on effectiveness. And if you've been with us for a while with Nebraska NeMTSS, that directly connects to our problem solving model. And so sharing this of just that reminder, this is a great way to work through things. So identify what's going on, analyze why it might be occurring, come up with a plan. What can we do to solve this? Let's implement and see, and then reflect on whether that was effective or not. And so then there's a lesson on that as well for decision-making steps and lesson ideas linked into that. Like our example that we gave for like the early childhood, the solution kit. So we link this in here is from the NCPMI website, which is our early childhood stuff. And so they've got big posters, they've got little posters, they've got posters in Spanish and other languages, but we have actually had these cards printed and laminated, and then we have them on a ring so we can show those an example. So maybe those are just hanging at each center. You have a solution kit and the kids can get that when a conflict arises. And then perhaps you have these big posters of the problem-solving steps hanging in your classroom so that students can easily identify, for some of our littles, what the steps are to solving problems that might come up. So all of that's linked in there. This lesson plan would be comparing and contrasting how different decisions might affect career choices. So that one is linked in. Moving to evaluating consequences. So here we want to make sure we are anticipating outcomes, understanding how our actions impact an outcome, identifying pros and cons, and then just asking questions about things, finding out more information. Here's a matrix from Edutopia. The blog post is linked in as well as the blank copy. This is a great way to, when you are have a decision you need to make, coming up with those, I could do X, Y, or Z. And so maybe putting that into a matrix like this and then assigning points for as many pros or cons for each of those possible outcomes or choices or situations that you would put yourself in. And then knowing that whichever one ranks highest is probably the better choice and probably has the most positive outcomes for you and for others. And so just a visual way to kind of work through all of that and then some reflection time on that as well. We've talked about these through here, but just different ways to practice this in your classrooms, in your content areas, and whatever you're doing with students. And again, perhaps it's just an easy pros and cons list. So write the good things about a situation, write the negative things about a situation, and compare your list. And you can have them do that on their own reflection with a partner in a group, thinking about just the what if. So thinking down the line, what would happen if I made a decision or I did something like decided to skip doing my homework or cheating on a test, and thinking through what could possibly happen if I did that. A dilemma card. So these are those real life examples, or just giving them a situation. The dilemma could be someone who didn't study, or sharing answers with someone who didn't study, or you go to the park and you find someone left a wallet with some money in it. Do you tell the truth or lie to stay out of trouble? And so then having them talk through what they might do and why. And then a decision tree. So perhaps this is just drawing a picture of how you make choices for a problem or a situation. So solving a conflict, choosing a career, again, kind of ties back to those lessons that we have shared in here as well. So lots of different ways to help practice and model and talk about problem solving. This lesson would be predicting consequences. So this one ties to that about predicting consequences of not being respectful at home or in the community. So again, that is linked in there. This one has it at grade 5, so that upper elementary level. And then I'm gonna hand it off to Jill to finish us up.
Perfect. Thanks, Emily. So lots of great resources, a ton of useful links that you guys can come back to. Also, just a reminder that all of these are also in our Padlet as well as just linked on the slides as well. So that brings us to healthy boundaries, which is that last sub skill when we're thinking about those problem solving skills. So when we're thinking about healthy boundaries, that's really the honoring the needs of both ourselves as well as others, being able to identify and know our personal limits, being able to communicate our wants as well as our needs, and then that being willing to say no. So those are all of the pieces that fall within healthy boundaries. Just kind of a quote as well to really kind of speak to when we think about healthy boundaries and really what that means, and within the context of that problem solving as well. So walls keep everybody out, boundaries teach them where the door is. For one of our first resources within healthy boundaries, so we can really kind of divide them up into a few different categories when we're thinking about boundaries. So especially those personal boundaries, so of emotional, material, time, intellectual, and physical. And so this is just really a nice visual representation. There's also a few additional resources that we have linked in our Padlet around setting those personal boundaries as well. But when we kind of break them down and really think about what each of those means, we have that emotional. So really thinking about setting those personal boundaries for inappropriate topics, emotional dumping, dismissing emotions. Within material, so thinking about when materials can be used, how materials are treated. Time we have outlined there, so lateness, when to contact, favors, free labor. Intellectual, so freedom to have your own thoughts, to have your own beliefs, your own values, and then your own opinions. And then physical, really breaking down into that proximity, touch, unwanted comments regarding appearance. So all things that really kind of fall within setting those personal boundaries, and just kind of some what could that look like? What could that sound like? Examples of that as well. We do also have an additional resource. This is a great one. It actually comes from Kids Helpline. These resources really encompass many of those sub-skills of problem solving. So not necessarily just that boundary setting, but just kind of that breakdown of all of those problem solving skills. This is just kind of a great resource to check out as well. If you scroll down on the website, they offer a ton of just helpful conversation starters, lots of information around being able to have kind of those tricky conversations, really thinking about different communication styles and a breakdown of what that means, being able to really deal with pressure and setting those different boundaries for ourselves, for others. And then lots of other just topics around problem solving within that website as well. This is just a nice resource here. So Emily and Sarah have shared a few different lesson plans. This one is on handling peer pressure, so identified for grades 4. It again comes from that Nebraska Career Development website, so we do have it linked in. This particular one really breaks down like having both positive as well as negative conversations around like peer pressure, what that can look like, what that can sound like. Walks you through lots of different scenarios to really think about some of the effects, really thinking about and breaking down kind of that peer pressure. Again, this one is for grade 4, but could certainly be adjusted and modified as well. Here, we always like to share some resources, just some different books, some book lists around some of the social emotional behavioral learning skills that we are addressing. So this one comes from NCPMI. So really kind of some books around early childhood, books to really support the work around problem solving, as well as just other social emotional behavioral learning skills. So we encourage you to check that out. There are some great books to be able to just kind of access there. Moving on from there, we also have just an elementary one linked in here. So This is Reading Rockets. So some of those books, especially thinking about those problem-solving skills, but books to support the work kind of at that elementary age level. And then, of course, we don't want to forget our secondary students as well. So some books to support the work from just some adult literacy ones, again, linked in there. Thinking about all of those just book resources that we've shared with you, we wanted to also provide some questions just around those problem-solving skills. So these can be some just helpful questions to kind of think about, questions to reflect on, maybe to share within some group work or some individual reflections. But these are some great ones just around, particularly those problem-solving skills. So really thinking about maybe it's the characters within the book and thinking about, did they make the best decision within the circumstances that were there? And then really talking about why and allowing the students to kind of share those reflections and talk through some of those different breakdown of those problem-solving skills. So like Emily was talking about, like some pros and cons and being able to evaluate those consequences. Other questions on there, so really thinking about the emotions that might have affected that decision making, and working through that decision making process and what emotions might have impacted that. Thinking about the motivation for making that particular decision, thinking about the outcome. Was that what maybe the character was hoping for in these different scenarios? Thinking about the consequences of the decision, maybe what could have been done differently, what we might do in the future. Um, Maybe even thinking about making a better decision, next time. So really kind of evaluating, again, thinking about those evaluating of consequences. So lots of different questions on there to be able to just utilize, work through with some of those book lists as well to support the work. And then that brings us to our exit ticket. So we always appreciate any feedback that you would like to provide. Gives us ideas for upcoming, just future topics to maybe address through our Coffee Connects, maybe additional resources that you're looking for. And if you need a attendance certificate, so like a certificate of attendance, you can also request that through that exit ticket link. And then that brings us just to our closing optimistic closure here, just really thinking about a reflection. So we shared lots of different resources around problem solving. So hopefully you can identify one of those resources that maybe you would like to utilize, bring into the classroom still within the end of the school year, maybe something you'd like to continue to build off of, or that you would just like to take a look at further. So just kind of a personal reflection, really thinking about what is one of those takeaways that you would really like to grow with. And then, of course, just our contact information. So if you have any questions or need additional support or resources, you can certainly visit our Nebraska MTSS webpage, or our personal emails are there as well.